Today, however, our support for democratic values in the region takes place against the backdrop of great power competition that is really an ideological rivalry between two competing value systems, that of the United States and our fellow democracies, and that of the Chinese Communist Party. At home, Beijing has shown a blatant disregard for human rights and the rule of law, whether it's their dismantling of democratic institutions in Hong Kong, or they're committing genocide against Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities in China. Abroad, the CCP's efforts to undermine trust in democratic institutions and use political and economic pressure to promote their form of authoritarian government are totally at odds with our values. Make no mistake, the CCP will continue to subvert freedom and democracy in the Indo-Pacific and beyond until either it does or it doesn't reach its goal of regional and ultimately global hegemony. In this era of strategic competition and in the wake of a global pandemic, it's crucial that the United States remain actively engaged in the Indo-Pacific to strengthen democratic institutions and provide countries with a model of governance that protects the rights of its people and promotes transparency and accountability.
After Tiananmen Square, where hundreds, potentially thousands of protesters were massacred, President Bush sent former Secretary of State Kissinger on a secret mission to China. He observed, and I quote, "The Chinese leaders were stunned by the reaction of the outside world. They could not understand why the United States took umbrage at an event that had injured no American material interests," end quote. A party official told Kissinger again, quote, "We don't like to hear that others ask us what to do. Americans like to ask others, do this or do that. The Chinese people do not want to yield to others," end quote. Fast forward to when Nikki Haley was serving as ambassador to the United Nations, confronted the Chinese delegates about the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. She essentially said that their leaders were shocked. We didn't understand that these were just terrorists. They seemed to communicate a right to wipe the Uyghurs off the map for the acts of a few criminals, and the world had no right to tell them what to do. Now, the current communist emperor in China has made it clear they still don't want to be lectured on human rights, human dignity, and the value of freedom. But that doesn't mean we don't have options or an obligation to live within our values. Recall after the Holocaust the phrase, "never again." The world can never again sit by and tolerate genocide. We acted in Rwanda, and we have an obligation to act now because never again is happening again in Xinjiang. The question, of course, is, what does that look like? Because while China asserts its Westphalian right to have no country meddle in its internal affairs, the United States has a right, and I said above, an obligation, to choose with whom we do business and how we support our allies. Militarize the man-made islands in the South China Sea against the findings of an international court, we have every right to navigate those seas. Conduct debt trap and wolf warrior diplomacy with our allies, well, we will work to reverse the economic freedoms that we granted. Steal the intellectual property of our companies, we will continue to sue in court and create legislation and agreements which force China's hand. Hack our defense systems to advance their own military buildup so through might they can continue their intimidation. Well, we'll shift forces to the Indo-Pacific and we'll build the advanced weapon systems with which no nation in the history of man has ever been able to compete. The people of China should understand the new situation of a world standing up to the CCP as a result of their authoritarian actions, specifically the totalitarian leader of Xi Jinping. We want nothing more than a great relationship with the Chinese people. However, Xi's actions are deplorable and they violate the very human right of freedom and self-determination, and the United States has every right to choose our partners based on their conduct and values. My only question